All right. Good. So.
We ready, Ben?
Yes, sir.
Let's bring our meeting to order tonight. Welcome all. Really good to have you with us tonight. And Ben, let's go through the procedures for those folks that may join us online.
All right, public comment is accepted by the planning commission, especially at public hearings like we have tonight. Before speaking, we'll ask you to get the chair's attention, either raising your hand in attendance in the room or via Zoom. If you have the Zoom app, that raise hand function will be at the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone, the button is *9. And then once acknowledged by the chair, you can mute or unmute through Zoom or using *6. I have made some of the consultants for the applicant panelists, and so they should be ready to participate at their will. Still asked to get our attention.
We're ready to proceed, Ben.
So yeah.
Okay. We're at that point on our agenda for public comment that with regard to items that are not on our agenda. So if there are folks that wish to provide some general public comment, Mary, anything tonight?
Thank you. Mary Rapar Stevenson, good evening. I wish you all the happiest of holidays and safe and healthy too. And just 2 comments. We're a very small city, municipality. We don't have that many staff. And I think part of your strategic plan in the future should be to figure out how we can care and maintain the things that we already have. Everybody would like new things and things that need maintenance and upkeep. Well, our staff is already stretched very thin. And I think that has to be part of the planning process is if you're going to have stuff, how do you care for this stuff? That is always a big thing. Maintenance is an ongoing 30 to 50 to 100-year issue. Stevenson has been here, I believe, from
1909.
Yes. And just think of all the things that have been maintained. How much would they cost? And it always comes down to money. And volunteers can't do everything. So I urge you to make that part of the strategic planning. And also, I filled out the survey for the Courthouse Plaza project. I'm glad to see that it has been, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as grand as it was in the beginning. Frankly, as time goes on and becomes less and less imperative, that Courthouse Plaza is a public space. It is a space where people can have their say, they demonstrate there, they tell the community what they're thinking. And frankly, I think the less done on the Courthouse Plaza, the better. I would like to urge the city to plant a blue spruce at the top of the stairs. When Scott Pineo had it cut down because it was not a native plant, I pointed out to him and Paul Peirce that they also were not native. And things that are not native don't necessarily have to be bad. And it was a beautiful tree that could be decorated. We didn't have to cut other trees and put them on the lawn and do whatever. So that is a historic space. The building is historic, even though it has not been recorded as yet. And I would urge us to do minimal stuff on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Any other comments? All right. Move on to our next item of business, which is the approval of our minutes of our November 13th meeting. You all hopefully have had a chance to at least look through those today. Are there any additions or corrections that you think are appropriate? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, August. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a second from Charlie.
I'll have to pass, wasn't here.
Okay.
wasn't here either, but I'll second the motion.
All those in favor of approving
Aye.
the minutes? Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? I guess, are you abstaining from that?
In case.
All right. Down to our new business, which is returning to the business we discussed. It's returning to old business. Is reopening our public hearing on the shoreline permit for Rock Cove Hospitality. Ben, you want to walk us through the preliminaries here?
Can do. Third meeting in a row that we're going over this. So in the state of Washington, when you all are asked to act like a judge, when you have quasi judicial proceedings, you need to be fair and impartial in your decision making, and you need to demonstrate your ability to be fair and impartial to the public and subject yourself to challenges from the applicants or the public. In order to demonstrate that, we asked the planning commissioners a set of 3 questions. The first is whether you have any financial interest in the outcome of this decision. That's in a positive way or in a negative way, something like competition, or if you're an investor or owner in the proposal. We ask if you've had any ex parte communications and communications outside of these chambers with anyone regarding the proposal. If you have had those discussions, we ask you to disclose them and the nature of this discussion for the benefit of the whole group. And then the more general question of if there's anything else about the applicants, the location, the project that would lead you to contribute to an inability to be fair and impartial in your decision-making process. So I will throw those 3 out there for you all to consider.
Thank you, Ben. And Davey, let's start with you. We'll just work around the table.
I have no ex parte communications with anyone regarding the project.
And no financial interest,
None whatsoever.
so you could be impartial. Fair enough.
I have no financial interest one way or another in this project. I've had no ex parte contacts. I wasn't here for the original discussion, but I've reviewed the record and I think I'm able to participate properly in the planning commission's discussion.
Thank you, Charlie.
I've had no ex parte communications, I have no financial interest, and I can be fair.
And I have had no ex parte communication. I have no financial interest. And I believe I can be impartial in discussions here, decision.
Okay, we have no disclosures by the commission members. Do we have any challenges from the applicants first? Okay, from the public or your fellow commission members, any challenges?
No challenge from this public.
All right,
Okay,
that preliminary matters taken care of. So
good, good. So, Ben, do you have a presentation for us tonight?
I do.
Bring us back up to speed.
Back up to speed. So you all are reviewing a shoreline substantial development permit. This is for projects that are within 200 feet of either Rock Creek, Rock Cove, or the Columbia River. In this case, it's Rock Cove. You can consider the shoreline master program as an overlay onto existing zoning that applies its own zoning. So in this case, the zoning or the shoreline environment designation is active waterfront, and active waterfront permits the use that's proposed here. It applies a certain set of regulations, in addition to other types of regulations from the SMP. Where we had left the hearing open the last time, it was to address two issues. Broadly, those were environmental impacts, no net loss of ecological functions, and public access. The applicants have submitted additional information related to both of those. The first is from Ecological Land Services, their qualified professional habitat consultant. I believe they are here too. That addresses agency comments from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and Washington Department of Ecology. Those comments were related to the mitigation sequence of the project. So mitigation sequence is a way of thinking that's end up reducing the ecological impact that projects have. And so that way of thinking requires you to first avoid any impacts. If you can avoid them, then to reduce them, and then to, I won't be able to name all of them over time, but to compensate for any remaining impacts that you can't avoid or reduce. Their initial narrative in the project was light on the description of the mitigation sequence that they went through. That's been supplemented here. Then there was a technical concern with the previous proposal for the remaining impacts, compensating for the remaining impacts. So the city code doesn't allow on-site mitigation for new impacts for projects like this one that are on heavily disturbed shorelines. That have areas of the site that are functionally isolated from the habitat resource. And so that's much of this shoreline is considered functionally isolated based on the elevation and the riprap change to the shoreline. And so they fall into this area where they have to restore the remaining buffers on the site, and they can't get credit for additional on-site work. They need to find an off-site solution. And in this case, they're proposing a fee in lieu of specific off-site proposal that I'll let them talk about more. With those two things, I believe that the project will satisfy those provisions of the SMP. The other issue was related to public access for the site. More specifically, the discussion is falling to the southern portion of the site where there's a existing easement that would connect to an off-site easement. And there hadn't been a proposal for making that connection. And instead, the proposal had stormwater facility there that would make it more difficult to make the connection. They have provided some options to make that connection here, one of which was a very expensive bridge, which doesn't seem feasible or proportionate to what the project is. And then there's a second proposal to do at-grade pathway around this steep area where they're proposing the stormwater facility. And so I'll let them talk a little bit more about that, but they are starting to really address the final specifics of the public access regulations that we have. And I think it's very close, but I do think that you have a decision, or that you have decisions to make to see whether you can really find that they're in compliance with those components of the SP. I have a draft permit documents in front of you that you're just seeing tonight based on the submittal we got today. There are several portions of that that are highlighted, and those are the remaining areas that I really think need a lot of focus. And so that's whether this proposal is whether this action diminishes the usefulness or value of the public access provided in that area, and a series of questions related to the feasibility of developing public access at that site. One component of that feasibility analysis would be if ADA is not feasible, is there another option? It's not ADA that still provides the resource without diminishing its value. And I might focus in on some of the ones after the conversation plays out or after the presentation by the applicants. That's this one.
It's not highlighted.
It should have some of 16 and 17 are the main focuses.
You're right.
Okay.
Sorry.
If there are no questions for me, I'll turn it over.
Okay,
Brad, I think that I'll have to be your cursor here.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
And,
Slides.
can you put it up on the screen, so,
Let me get the sharing part.
and then just your point of order, Katie wasn't able to, attend, but Stephanie Simpson, the CEO of ELS, is on, but I don't know if you've elevated her to a panelist.
Tried to. And if the two of you would like to get your names in the record for our minute takers to listen for voices, that might be helpful.
Next up. My name is Brad Kilby. I am a land use planner with Harper Hoff Peterson Gillis in Portland, 205 Southeast Spokane Street, Portland, Oregon, 97202.
Dean Maldonado, owner of FBM Development, with the owners of the property, and I live in Ridgefield, Washington.
I just go through this real quick, and I guess primarily my presentation tonight is to focus on the issues that we discussed last month for our round of continuance. Just a reminder, here's the location on Rock Road. Next slide.
If I can get out of presentation. There we go.
And this is the, so yeah, you should have all hard copies. So this is the mill when it was up and running.
One more time. Apologize.
Location. 1952 to 1973, it was a mill. And there's quite a bit of activity on there. This kind of shows you how much it was impacted at that time. And then the part that we'll discuss over to the left is that draw or that ravine, where staff is asking for a connection across to the adjacent property, those easements. Next slide, please. One of the things last time, and this is probably more geared towards the review agencies like the Washington Department of Ecology and Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, was they said, what have you considered? Like, what alternatives? So we went back and there were 21 different site plans developed over the last couple of years. And then this is the site plan that was approved built a couple of years ago. And then, go ahead, next slide, please. This is the site plan revisions that show kind of what our site plan was when we came in at the first hearing this year, along with some location. If I can go up here, I'll point some things out. So this is what they call the Fish and Habitat Wildlife Conservation Area. These blank spots are the original orientations that we came into you with the first one. And then if you remember, we were impacting it over here. The trail was put out here. And then each one of these blank areas denotes the original configuration of that unit. And then we originally were proposing 19 units and we reduced it to 18 units which reduces the site coverage to about just under 10%, and then reduces the impacts to the fish and wildlife habitat conservation area to by 15.8%. And then I'll go into public access next slide. And just
Advance the slide. I could do this without messing it up. There we go.
there you go. So if you remember, these are the public access, and this was an exhibit we showed before, but I will say that the public access figure on the right doesn't show the reorientation of those units. This was an exhibit that we had provided previously that I just wanted to discuss. So at the top, on the top left are the existing easements. And this was, I believe, just based on my information of the history, that this was discussed at length with you folks in the past about access along those easements. And then on the right is the access that we're proposing. And it, you know, the way that those paths are is, and we talked to Ben about this, is that we would have a public access easement over across the paths and sidewalks on the property. They would have access then to the areas that they enjoy access to today, which is primarily the peninsula at the middle. Next slide, please. So speaking to what Ben had alluded to, this is the connection. So if you remember that ravine on the aerial photo, this is the crossings that we were asked to look at. And the first one is a bridge crossing. And so I can't tell you with 100% exact science that it would be $972,000. It would be in that range or higher because they'd have to put bridge abutments across there. And as you can see, the pedestrian bridge right now, the average slope is 6%. So they would have to have several landings along there, which would require that they do several abutments. So our structural engineers worked up costs for each one of those abutments and then the total cost of the bridge. They estimated it to be about $972,000. We don't build a lot of bridges, so I can say that with certainty. I'm not 100% positive that that's what it would cost. But it's going to be there or about there, maybe more expensive. So it would connect partially, like unless we built the entire bridge at that cost, it would have to connect on the adjacent property. And if you've gone out there and looked behind the building, there's not a lot of room to come into the location of where that easement's at. So you can't build a bridge halfway across the river and just stop it. That wouldn't make sense. And then it's just, we believe that's roughly proportional. I do want to point out, because it's coming to play here in a minute, in our last slide, we were discussing this, and this is the stormwater quality facility and an outfall right there that had presentation. Next slide, please.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
There, according to the pictures, there used to be a bridge there. Is it down to use the same
Down
location?
at the very end. I don't know if that was a bridge or a dam or abutment. I don't know how they, I mean, but that was at the other end of the ravine. It's not clear to me in that aerial what that was.
Okay.
Yeah, it could have very well been a bridge. So this is, we also looked at an at-grade access, and what we tried to do here was keep it along the contours. This goes, runs basically parallel to the access along Rock Creek Drive. And it's estimated around $300,000 to do that work. And then you'll see a red line along the side of that. And that's approximately 6 foot high retaining wall to retain that up against the backside. I just note how close it is to Rock Creek Drive and the existing pathway there. And so we'd still build the pathway heading out from our site, our last unit, out to Rock Creek Drive and then connect to that paved path. You know, again, this is for neither one of these two would be ADA accessible without several landings. I feel like it's also important to note that today there's probably nobody going down to that location along the shoreline. So providing access to that area would be extremely difficult. Ben did ask the conversation him and I had today of what it would take to actually, okay, we're not doing ADA, what would it take to get down to the water, or do the crossing, with, switchbacks and things like that. So I do have our civil engineer on the line, and I'll let him speak to that. Morgan, are you available to go into that a little more?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Worthington, a civil engineer with HHPR. And yeah, I can walk through a little bit more on this on-grade path. The one, Brad, you were just mentioning, this one that goes up and alongside Rock Creek Drive. This one could be technically ADA accessible. I just wanted to make that clear. But did you mention one additional option? I couldn't quite hear you.
Remember when we talked earlier today about if you were to not have to make it ADA accessible and then you were to go around
Yes.
lower, like take it down?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you, rather than kind of following the contours, sort of followed the ravine and went down and back up, I think that option would definitely not be ADA. If you're making it down toward the bottom of the ravine from the project property, I think with some minor grading and retaining walls, maybe 10 to 15% grade would be reasonable. But coming back up onto the adjacent property, the grades there are, over 2 to 1. So they're very, very steep and would not be traversable as a pathway. And even if we potentially looked at angling that pathway to follow the existing easement that is on the adjacent southern property, even that would have slopes up to 25% and would require retaining walls, and it wouldn't be a really traversable pathway within any reason, I think.
Thanks, Morgan. And then I guess the last thing to point out is all three of these, so we've estimated costs, but all three of these would require further impacts to the FHWCA. And every one of both of the costs estimates that we have provided, that did not account for any environmental permitting that would have to occur and mitigation costs associated with that. Next slide, please. And then we do have also Stephanie Simpson. She is from ELS. She is the president. And I don't know, Stephanie, if you're available, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your letter, about the agency comments.
Yes. So do you want me to go through all of the agency comments?
No, I think your letter does a good job of doing that, but if any high points that you might want to make.
Okay, and I can talk about the kind of the proposed mitigation.
Yes.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, we're basically out of room on site to do any further mitigation. We are planting just over 950 native trees and shrubs throughout the remaining buffer on site. And those shrubs are consistent with what's listed in the Skamania County's recommended plants for the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. So there is about 0.16 acres additional mitigation needed, and we're proposing to make a one-time payment to the Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Board. I'm trying to find that. Oh yeah, the Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Fund. And we're basing the cost on Clark County Cumulative Effects Fund. We're asked to kind of research other similar programs for payment in lieu type mitigation. And Clark County has their Cumulative Effects Fund, and the cost for that is $33,000 per acre of impact. So based on that, at 1.6 acres, it would be or excuse me, 0.16 acres, it would be a payment of $5,280. So we feel like that, since the impacts are right next to the Columbia River, that would be a good fit for mitigation for the project. And then in addition to the enhancement we're already doing on site. And I guess, can I explain anything further on that?
Now, I have some other questions, not on that mitigation issue, but so,
Sure.
since we have Stephanie here from ELS, so, and I am still, like I said, I reviewed the record. I was not here for the previous meeting, but I'm still playing a little bit of catch up, so bear with me. It appears to me that, though it was a little ambiguous, but if you look at the site plan, on page, I think it's 37, it shows, unlike your slide, Brad, that was just up, it shows the existing gravel boat ramp. Is that going to be retained? Are you still going to have the ability to get a kayak or a paddle board or something down to the water? Okay, that's common sense would indicate that would be a good idea, but I wasn't clear in the various versions of the site plan that that was good, that was there. Good, I'm happy about that. But then in your last bullet of ELS's letter, you talk about how it's unclear about how the project will meet the requirement of the S&P to provide public access. Tell me about how that's going to work. I mean, from what I see of the site plan, the street's not gated, so anybody can drive in. Good. Don't like gated streets. Sidewalk, the Rock Creek Road sidewalk connects to the circulation path inside. Good. If I'm taking a walk or going for a run, I can enjoy the waterfront in the project as a resident of the city. That's good
You'll
access.
get lots of lodge people coming down there.
Yeah. So and then some of your guests are going to bring paddle boards or kayaks and launch them at the boat ramp. Good. That's the whole active use intention of that section of our code. But how's it going to work in terms of anybody else? I mean, are you worried about that? Is that going to be a problematic condition that anybody and their brother can come down and put their kayak in at your boat ramp? This is a little bit of a practical question, but it was raised in your letter here, or Caitlin's letter, about, it's unclear about how's that going to work, public access for purposes of water recreation.
Sure. Well, we don't have any intention of taking out the gravel launch today. It is public access, so I guess we're not going to be out there policing that. But I will say, I mean, it's definitely a question of liability for Dean.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, he has a public access easement. He's being sued for somebody falling in a rosard right now. So I'm just saying, like, people find a way to sue over things
Fair
like
enough.
that. But
Fair enough.
it's not, there's no intention on him as a developer in this development to preclude people from accessing it. It doesn't matter if they're local or
Not
not.
going to necessarily advertise it as a public boat ramp because it's not.
And it is important to note that it's like pedestrian access, right, is where it is. So it's not his intention necessarily to provide automobile parking for the public here in this location if they're not staying there to recreate down there. I mean,
street parking in that section of Rock Creek?
there's not.
Right, yeah.
And this is what I would say about that is, like, if they're staying there, they can probably drive and park there, or if it's not busy and some of the parking is underutilized, that's going to be up to his operations to decide whether or not they're going to enforce any type of parking. I suspect that you would get parking enforced when there are events in the event center, weddings, things like that. But beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to get overwhelmed. I think it's as a practical matter, you're going to have some people that are going to, but I was concerned actually that the boat ramp might be going away because it wasn't in every version of the site plan. And I'm not in your business, but I would predict that either if your first or second guest doesn't bring their paddle board, your third or fourth guest will. It's the very nature of the project that people are going to want to have access to the water. So you're preserving that for the guests in the facility, and it's also available on a reasonable basis for members of the public. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
suppose you could do surveillance cameras and
Well,
to
then
avoid
surveillance-
things like,
I'm a surveillance manager, it's running the place.
I mean, you know, that does invite, you know, the possibility of car break-in.
Do you have any other questions?
No, that was, that was my only real site, well, my other questions were implicit, but Brad indicated and Mr. O'Hara did that the public access to the sidewalk circulation is daytime, anytime, no barriers. So that's good. No, those are my concerns.
Okay. The thoughts, questions? I mean, one of the things we talked about was that public access on the south side of the property, bridge or path or
Oh, yeah.
whatever. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, I'm still a little mystified by that, frankly. What would that be providing connection to? In the short run, not much, right? Ultimately, maybe something else, but there's a, you know, it gets to the retirement community.
There's an
Property.
existing easement
Yeah,
on a retirement, center property.
yeah, okay,
which is an unimproved easement.
yeah.
I don't remember in this original redraft of the public right of way that there was any requirement to make that connection.
It wasn't in the 2020 approval.
Yeah, I don't remember
The
that.
easement was required, but no development of that easement.
Right, I mean, the easement had to remain, and that's, I mean, the existing easement that's shown on, there's a page number on here, but in the packet that you're given, represents the change that was made from the original easement that the county had on the property. It was the one that's existing currently was the best adaptation of that original easement, which was much larger. So this was a more minimal easement, but it maintained the access on the perimeter like the original. So on the proposed access, what I see is an elimination of public access on the southern side in that jetty, which again is a deviation from the existing and a further deviation from the original. That would be my kind of pause.
So I pulled up Brad's slide again to verify what you just said. So there is still a loop pathway along.
Right,
the southern
because that's in
edge.
keeping of what the original, when they purchased the property, that was the existing easement that was there. And so this change was requested by them to allow for more buildable space. And so now in this newest request, I see an elimination of that southern shorefront as a public access, and I see buildings there, which is not in keeping with the original easement or the one that we approved previously. Just as a note.
I can speak to that if you'd like.
Sure.
Again, that's, if you're talking about the south, that is along the top of that ravine. So there's really nobody accessing that today. If you were to go out there today, probably wouldn't see anybody going down to the shoreline from there.
It's the public access that was in when the county owned it was unimproved.
Sure.
And so when you bought the property, that easement existed. You asked for an adjustment, which we gave you, which maintained, again, the idea that the county had. So whether it's being used or not is not really the point. The point is that that was the original plan, was that shoreline was public access. And what I see on this request that you have now is you're eliminating that access through this area on the shoreline. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I guess if we're eliminating any paved access, I suppose if somebody wanted to walk behind the units and get down to that, and they were able to rappel, they could probably go to that water. And there was that, if, I mean, if you make that argument, it's at the north, we have that same issue where that inlet is not accessed the same way, but it's just that we're not necessarily providing a path because that's where people can launch their boats. When we proposed a path in there, we got Department of Ecology pushback for putting the path within that FHWCA. So one of the amendments or changes that you've seen in our newest site plan that's in there that shows those white areas, shows the reorientation of that path, make sure that it's out of the FHWCA. But that's just a paved path. If people are using that to get their boats down there and there's a trail or something down there, and I mean, I guess, you know, that's not something necessarily that we would stop. I mean, that's where the launch is, like.
But does the new ask for a change in the easements?
I think our current plan provides the best location and a paved surface to the best location where you can actually access the shoreline.
Does it maintain the original and the current easements in the same way with the new
We would
request?
likely have to re-record easements if it's on the left and the existing easements. We would re-record those easements to follow the new proposed access requirement.
Right, so basically you would eliminate the public easement on the southern side of those units.
We're getting rid of any easement there due to us being in the wild or the
FHWC.
FHWC barrier area and the steep slope and critical areas there.
Right.
You'd never be able to access water from there. So we set back, then that's where we put the cabins in. We moved it easier access, you know, to within it. So does it stay on the same easement as originally? No, but it's just like a comp plan. When you do your comp plans and roadways in the future, it's a suggestion for you're going to do as much you can do. When you go out there to build a road or the easement, then we start running into problems with easement, steep slopes, critical areas, setbacks, you know. So to get around all of that, we then brought it in the inside. If you'll look at the top portion of your entrance into there, that is what is accepted and everything. So the difficulty I'm finding is because somebody at one time said, well, this is it, accepted. We came in there, we've had no problems with here. If you're to fold this over, they're almost identical as what we're trying to do. So you're not asking me to cross over the water here, and you're not asking me, and I can't get into their area anyhow. So we did the same down here. When people are coming in, they have the access to come clear around here, go to the boat lodge. The only area where you can really get to the water is right there anyhow. There's a really steep drop off here, and you can't get to it here, nor can you get to it here. So what we did is to give the public access to our private property development. We came up to have this access to this easement here. We can't cross here to the existing easement. So we came up. So once again, like with all plans that are set into the city, it's a suggestion, it's a measurement tool on how roads are going to be built in easements. But once we got there, now we have the problem, like I said, steep slopes, critical areas, setbacks that we can't get into. So we're trying to get that. So everybody has a walking path. Everybody sees there's a couple of areas that they're not going to get to walk to, like on the top part. But like I said, the bottom half is a mere reflection of the top half. So we've achieved giving you access to the water, public access to the water, walking around the entire parcel with some setbacks in some areas and coming back to the sidewalk. We didn't take anything away from the time the mill has been there. We have invasive plants that are in there right now. You guys stacked shavings, manure, saturated in urine in that corner for I don't know how long. You know, so we removed all that at our cost. We're going to clean it up, remove all the invasive plants, replant, probably somewhere between 400 and $500,000 of re-landscaping to enhance that area, so it's a nice area, so people come home.
I dumped my cat there because I didn't want a cat, and that cat walked 2.5 miles back to my place. And I said, fine, you live here.
Is that required disclosure?
What the cat say about that?
Yeah, right.
So we think by hiring experts in the field, consultants and stuff, we've tried to come to the best plan that, you know, meets your requirements of having public access, you know, private access, parking, impervious surface, setbacks, you know, environmental, or that shape of land that you have. And as I mentioned, there's really only one place to access the water there. That's on that tip down. And we're given access. Sure.
But the previous easement gave them the ability to traverse that area without having to look at a building.
They would have never traversed it. You had horse manure stacked there. You have invasive plants, there's blackberries there. We pulled out, I don't know how many old logs and trees there. Nobody had access to that for decades, upon decades.
So the answer is yes, you're eliminating
Yeah.
current, okay. That was, I didn't need a history on what previous owners did. I'm just asking about what your proposed changes from what we've already adopted.
Yeah, we are
Would
proposing
include.
to change of the easement.
Right.
We think it's behooves the public and people that are walking to be there. And we're restricted also on our setbacks. Steep slopes, critical areas. Right.
Of that's Davey?
One broad one. Is there a cost benefit analysis to all this? I mean, I know you guys are satisfied with it. I was just wondering, you know, how much benefit are we talking about?
For benefit for.
Oh, just, you know, for the community,
Oh, there'll be $6 to $8 million put in here into buildings and cabins, so that'll increase with the tax basis of what the community will get off there. And I'm not sure how your retail sales are set up, or sales tax are set up for hospitality, but there'll be also revenue that is produced out of that. Okay.
no, I figured you guys had, you know, gone over it
Yeah.
extensively.
I apologize, I don't have that.
No.
Charlie, anything else?
So I guess, I think I know the answer to this question, but there are no, at this point, there are no remaining issues in contention between staff and the applicant about the conditions, right?
About the,
Proposed conditions of approval that you prepared.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay,
I wouldn't say that. And
well, I guess I'd like to ventilate that a little bit. So what are the issues? What are the issues about conditions of approval other than this one we ventilated that are worth talking about?
okay, beyond this one.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's been much discussion or talk about disagreement. I'll read the suggested conditions related to the no net loss in the critical areas that are new since the last time and the new submittal. So proposed condition number 10. Nope, that one was there too. It's just the addition of proposed condition number 11 on page 15 of what was provided tonight. Prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall supply a payment in lieu of on-site mitigation to an entity involved in habitat restoration. For example, Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Group, Columbia River Wetland Mitigation Bank, etc. The payment shall be no less than $5,280, and a receipt of payment by the restoration entity shall be supplied to the city. So,
We discussed earlier.
yeah, that's part of their proposal and provide some flexibility in there. As they work things out.
Are there any others?
With the location, that you had concern about the location of the storm facility.
That's, yeah, I would put that all within the public access discussion.
So I would, can we go to, I think our site plan that shows the crossing, one of the crossings? Yeah, so that, what Ben and I discussed earlier was the stormwater outfall just north of this, and it's south and at grade. And the, outfall, stormwater outfall. And so I did have our engineers look at that after we discussed it today. And it wouldn't matter where that trail went. Our impact wouldn't change within the FHWCA, but we might have to relocate that. Because of the size, it's sized based on the amount of development that's occurring on the property. So the size of it wouldn't change, but if we were required to construct any of the pedestrian connections, we might have to relocate that. Like the ones going south to the property.
That's not a condition of removal at this point. The connection to the south.
Not yet, right?
Right.
Why do you guys keep saying it's south, it's west?
What's that? I'm sorry.
West.
Yeah.
It is south and west, yeah.
South is that way, west is that way, east is that way, north is that way. Maps mean north on them. Oh, like,
And they do, except the image that I cut out here doesn't show that north arrow. In the packet it's to you.
This where Foster Creek dumps out.
Foster Creek is on the north. Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, excuse my, asking a basic question, but is it still before the planning commission to consider requiring this?
Definitely needs more guidance on this. Some of the draft conditions there, for related to this, take one step back in order to focus on the decision-making process that's laid out in the SPP. And so it prioritized providing public access.
Right.
It acknowledges that a golden highway is not always going to be feasible for every development. And so it puts indicators in there about how you're going to scale back how that access is provided. Some of those ways to scale it back are to not have it be ADA compliant where that's infeasible, or to ask for participation from adjacent property owners or from the city if it's not feasible for a single developer to do that public access. And so where they're talking about doing all the public access on the north side of the site, I think it's, they're acknowledging it's feasible to have this as barrier-free ADA. It's only on this site. They're starting to make the case that the public access improvement in this area, one, is not feasible for ADA. It's either going to be $1 million bridge with asterisks that it might be more than that, or $200,000 for a pathway directly adjacent to an existing pathway. With that second proposal, they are starting to make that case that an improvement shouldn't be done here at this point, and maybe providing some payment in lieu of providing this.
Yeah.
They haven't yet made that case or made any sort of proposal related to a payment in lieu.
Well, but you mean beyond the small payment that we just discussed, right?
Yeah, for the
But
for
so.
public access purposes, there hasn't been
A
anything.
little bit here, but this is not the first time you've heard this from me, but I'm very interested in pedestrian access in general. But it has to be practicable and it has to be a trip somebody wants to take. And frankly, I don't see any public utility to this So we have an easement, that's lovely, but it's a trip to nowhere as a pedestrian, as far as I can tell, because we've got the sidewalk. If I'm going for a long walk or a long run along Rock Creek Road, and I want to get out and take a look at the cove, I'm probably going to take your pathway. That's nice, you know, but I'm going to get back out to Rock Creek and I'm going to take a left and keep going. So I don't see why the public is benefited by this potential trail, aside from whether it meets, you know, aside from the other code requirements that bear on it. I'm always going to focus on that practical question. Is anybody actually going to use this thing? I think not.
I would disagree with that.
Okay, factual matter, before getting into that. So these applicants, submitted their complete application prior to adopting our, shoreline access
Right.
plan. So they're not going to be subject to any specific implementation of that, but that's, the specific cut sheet for that plan is on page 349 of the packet.
Okay.
So almost the very end, and that identifies this connection corridor. At the broad scale, and then I'll turn it back to you,
In the
David.
plan.
Okay, yeah. At the broad scale, we're looking at the interior connections that seem feasible and related to the site's development. The feel of those is going to be more of a public, well, so there's a scale of private to private public to public private to public.
Right.
And it's going to be closer to that public private or private public, where you're walking past the front door of these rental units, and as the user, you're just not sure if you should be there. As I'm looking at that, that's kind of okay. We do have the nice pathway along the cove, and so where there's that event building, there will be a nice pathway there. As a user, you're definitely going to feel like you should be there.
Mhm.
Some of those other portions aren't going to feel as good, and so having this corridor and this connection,
What page
as
is that again? I'm sorry.
349,
349. Yeah, okay, I see it.
making sure that this connection to that existing easement is possible and advances our long-term shoreline access plan becomes very important, based on those changes that are proposed on the other part of the site.
I don't have that page, Ben. Sorry.
349.
Yeah,
It's the new packet.
yeah, I was looking at the new packet. I don't think there's the. Like,
Well, I look at the options that we have here and report. I have a hard time feeling that they're appropriate on a couple of fronts. One is, in terms of the use, I don't think the bridge is a viable. I'm not so sure the path as it's laid out there is also viable. I'm not sure it really warrants that level of investment. But the other thing that that piques my interest on this is either the bridge or this path is going to have a significant impact on the conservation area. And if we're trying to protect this conservation area, why wouldn't we try to work and access around that conservation area? Is my thought. I mean, a retaining wall is going to block those upslope processes that feed down through those riparian areas. The bridge is going to require the construction of, abutments, foundations. That's pretty disruptive. I think, I'd like to see us be able to come around from, the Rock Creek Cove stuff and still have an access, whether it's that sidewalk access back into this area. But I'm not so sure I find either the cost or the impact of these two options that we're looking at is really a compelling reason to go with either.
So again, I'm gonna go back to, the existing site plan that's in this packet, which shows the original 3 phases. And the existing easement, which is a reflection of what the applicant asked for as a change from the original easement layout at the time of the purchase from the county. So I'm looking at what I proposed. Not only is it a change to the public access and the corridors, but it also looks like a potential site plan change. Are they submitting a site plan at the same time? Or is this just about adjustments of the easement?
Say more about site plan.
Okay, so there's an approved site plan that we did when we adjusted the easement originally. So here is existing easements and then proposed.
Right.
Existing was formulated on the original site plan, which is shown in the back of the packet. What's shown in the proposed doesn't look anything like that. I'm kind of like, how do you get from point A to point Z?
Right.
What happened in the middle?
So one component of this proposal would be to do a plat alteration or plat vacation, which is the mechanism you use when you're altering or eliminating some public right-of-way, public easements, and changing lot lines or eliminating lot lines. Guidance I've given to the applicants here is to go through that plat vacation process. There are 2 legal lots on this site. They want to develop it as a single phase, where before they wanted to do multiple phases. So their suggestion.
We already previously did 1 lot line elimination.
Right. And so that same tool would be used to eliminate the remaining lot line on the interior of the site and to alter the easement areas based on the approval that you would issue. So the plats vacation process is reviewed by the city council and not the planning commission. The guidance I've given them is to go through, get this approval so that it gets wrapped into the plat that's presented to the city council.
I guess because, and again, this goes back to the original public access when they purchased the property. They asked for an adjustment to that. We considered that and we came to what we have now as the existing easements and existing pathway, which the applicant was willing to improve the pathways beyond what the county just had as easement. So that was already their kind of agreement to, we're going to ask for this, but we're going to give you an upgraded path. So what it appears now is we want to change that again. So just so that everybody has the complete concept, I think we also need to go back to what was the original before this started, because we're starting to do like these little steps and pretty soon you lose sight of what was the original intent. And so the existing easements were our best adaptation of what the original intent was and what the applicant was asking for as a change. And so if we are just keeping to kind of like push that envelope a little bit further and a little bit further without being mindful of what was the original intent when they purchased the property and the restrictions that they bought the property full knowledge of. And I think most of the people on the commission weren't here, so they don't know what that original intent was.
Right.
So I would say that we need to look at that before we make any decision on whether it's appropriate to change the easements or not.
In the record from the, well, as part of the first staff report, I included something and I gave away my sheet, but it's probably page 347 or so of the packet has that orange line. Did I get it right? 47?
Yeah, I'm looking at
Yeah.
345, 346, and 347.
Yeah. It has the easement as it existed between 1999 and 2020.
Yeah.
And so that original proposal would have been a perimeter path.
Mine only goes to something. I'm missing part of my pack.
Maybe that other stapled one.
The staff report.
Oh, all right, I got the top. All right, pretty what?
347. And 345 shows you the original,
345 is the
is
one.
the original easement.
Yeah.
The pre,
Right.
Yeah. And so that easement line was something that was really,
It was a little arbitrary,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Right.
And so this southwestern portion was originally in an area where it wasn't feasible to actually have a path. And so as part of accepting the applicant's request for a change of easements, is they moved that up a little bit so that it became on, not on the cliff, but up on the top of the cliff.
while still connecting to that existing offsite easement.
As best as feasible. Right. And I think at that time we discussed, well, just running back out to the road where there's a sidewalk made the most sense, but maintain that easement connection going down there. In my recollection, I don't remember any requests that they actually make a bridge or a connection. They just leave that as an easement.
Right.
So
A little bit-
all of this $900 and stuff,
The code is a little bit different this time, and so they're trying to meet the regulations of the updated SMP. So, and part of it is telling the story about what is feasible and what are the alternatives when something isn't feasible. As Mr. Breckel talks about trying to avoid the impacts altogether by going out to the existing sidewalk and finding a way back. One of the complications there is where this property line is and where that easement is. And so we're only dealing with this applicant. The connection here does bring a new pathway onto that adjacent property owner's land, or proposes on that adjacent property owner's land, which none of us have the authority to make that decision.
Right.
To do that. But I think that it is something that's possible. We don't have an avenue for that. That can be part of some sort of payment in lieu.
Well, in the original easement, again, back to my pet peeve about practicality, actually went back out and connected to the sidewalk, not didn't.
It did.
So this one doesn't, right? So near and yet you're so far. It's a pathway to get to the adjacent property, but it doesn't connect to the sidewalk on Rock Creek, right?
That was the applicant's proposal.
This
So
one's-
if you go one more page up, there's the full orange. That's the,
right,
that was platted in 1999.
right, but it connected out to the sidewalk, right here.
There,
Yeah.
yeah, but we're at.
I know, I'm aware of that, but I'm saying, if all you can do is get to here because of property line issues, then again, you don't finish the trip back to the sidewalk as a pedestrian. So it's a sidewalk to nowhere.
That's why we had them, or the proposed, and then what's actually on the easement is the one that continues here on their own property.
Is out last month.
Well,
Does Rockhold actually own
On
that
that-
parcel there?
That little leg right there.
Oh,
back out
oh,
to-
I see.
Right,
Okay, I
And
missed that.
because that was impractical as
Right.
it exists now.
Right.
But they maintain that easement, but they don't have to add.
Okay, which they approximately do here. It's different, but it's different, makes the connection.
Okay, Mr. Breckle, if we can get the public hearing component
Yeah.
done,
Okay,
and then,
All right. Let's open the public hearing at 7:15. And at this point, I'd ask for folks that are speaking in favor of this particular proposal to make comments. Anybody willing to speak in favor? All right. Then I would ask for comments in opposition.
Well, I have a lot of comments. Mary Rapar Stevenson, I've been sitting here making notes, and I forgot my reading glasses, so forgive me if I'm a little slow here. I want to reiterate the point I made about public easements. We don't have enough of them in our city, and the ones we have, I think we should try to keep as close to reality as possible. You all know the loop around the rec center. That is a nice path. It's 1 mile. And frankly, when you look at this project here and you look on the picture on the left and you see the picture on the right, and the picture on the left has gotten rid of a lot of public access, even though the blue is there. People are not going to walk among cabins and buildings and that. That's almost prohibitive in and of itself, because we all have that, oh, I'm not going to intrude on people. So I would like to see a path that is around the property, that's close to the original easement as probable and possible. And it keeps the public out of the business part of this proposal. And it's like the path around the park. You know, that works. People go around. They don't go in and out and through and parking lots and this and that. I just don't like that idea. And I'm pretty sure that people who are vacationing here probably wouldn't like to see. And there are a lot of walkers on our existing path. So I think this should mirror the Rock Cove path that we already have. Build it around and as close as possible to the original easement as possible. I don't care about bridges, but you should keep the easement. You never know what comes in the future. This development could be here 30, 50 years and then it's gone and something else comes along. And you spoke about the next door property. I don't know that Rock Cove owns that land, that they're not leasing from the county. So I don't think you're going, I don't know that. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I remember the rental fee was $1,500 a year or a month or whatever it is for Rock Cove Assisted Living Facility. And I'm assuming that that bridge connects to that property. And because there's another public access right on the side of the building at Rock Cove Assisted Living, which takes you down to the water. So there is a connection already with the sidewalks, but I'm assuming, I don't know why they put that bridge there. Again, public access. The riprap is discussed in here, and Amaya has sent a letter, and I have to agree with some of her questions. There's unpermitted riprap and a functionally isolated buffer. I think we need to know way more what's going on there. This is her December 11th letter. She is the Assistant Regional Habitat Program Manager for WDFW. And then, okay, the in lieu payment. I don't think that it should be spent on the fish down there. I think it should be spent around the park. Rock Creek fairgrounds. We've talked about putting more vegetation along the shoreline of Rock Creek or Rock Pond, let's say, which is also known as Stevens Lake, to the who've been here for a long time. And so why not use that money here locally to enhance something that's closer to an existing walking path, since they're going to be putting a lot of landscaping on their project. In the geotechnical report, which is this lovely thing, and it's really nice. I went through it pretty quickly, and there's a lot of questions here in the geotechnical report that are highlighted in yellow, and I think those have to be looked at by all of us. You know, there's on page 205, the currently proposed layout for future structures sited at over the edge of the fence is generally considered unfeasible. So what does that mean? And remedial grading and or other appropriate mitigation measures will be required. The geotechnical report is actually really good, and I think you all need to put a lot of more conditions on this project if you're going to follow the geotechnical report. And Maya has raised some good questions. I think those need to be answered too. I did have a question. This is a very unconsolidated peninsula. So what is the weight of the buildings and the parking lot do? You know, there are consequences to weight, especially on unconsolidated material. And so, you know, are those parking lots going to be impermeable? Where's that water going to go? How do you engineer to not have it go into Rock Pond? Is it going to go into our water, into our sewer system, or into our storm water? So I think there's a lot of questions in this, but also, you know, we're looking at this public access. We've discussed it to death here, but what's the percent loss of public access? Which public access should be natural. It shouldn't be like this, going in between things and that. We should keep it as natural as possible. And are we losing that public access? You know, this is the first time in my 33 years living here that I've even heard of a public access easement on a property that's being developed. And I think we should try to keep public access and public easements as true to their proposed, whatever they were, why they were proposed, as we can. Maybe those people thought that they would have a path around that peninsula at some point. But I think a path around instead of going through and through is would make people a lot happier. You're not intruding on the people who are recreating there, but you're having a nice brisk walk around the peninsula and going back to Rock Creek and not crossing any bridges and all these other things. So I know I've been a little bit scattered in my review, but I do think the technical report actually bears a lot more of looking through it, especially the yellow highlighted areas. As a geophysicist, I always get concerned about uncompacted sedimentation. And the riprap bothers me. You know, what happens when that riprap needs to be amended and it's illegal already? Do we have another avenue? How do you keep that project from being swept away if we have a lot of water or something? I know it. Sarcastic here, but you know, we do get water here, and riprap soon doesn't last forever. or it might. So what do we do if we need some more on another side of the project? So those are just some concerns I have from just looking through this and hearing their discussion. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. As Ben, did you have a,
I wanted to enter the two written comments that we got this afternoon from Department of Ecology and Fish and Wildlife into the record. The first one came from Department of Ecology in response after they reviewed today's submittals. Hi, Ben, thanks for sharing and thanks for your hard work on this. I think the revised site plan and mitigation plan adequately addressed my comments. I do not have any further comments or questions. That is from Megan Tate, Wetland Shoreland Specialist, Shoreland Environmental Assistance Program, Department of Ecology. Second is from Department of Fish and Wildlife. Hi, Ben, regarding the in lieu fee, is there a way to condition or track that the money is used toward a new project component versus paying for a project that is already planned? This question came up in a slightly different context where someone asked if an in lieu fee could cover something like increased cost due to inflation. I would not support an in lieu fee funds covering part of a project that is already planned and instead encourage the funds to be used to add a new component to a project, such as incorporating additional plantings or enhancing a new riparian area. I briefly looked through the SMP and don't see anything in the code that outlines this process. Second point is I'm still struggling with the applicant using potentially unpermitted riprap to justify a functionally isolated buffer. If riprap was not present on site, is there any riparian vegetation that would otherwise be evaluated for impacts and mitigated through riparian enhancement? I see a few patches of vegetation that appear to be contributing to natural process, such as contribution of organic matter into the riparian and aquatic habitats. I understand that there are areas that have been mowed and maintained, but the functionally isolated buffer follows the riprap footprint, and the riprap was constructed in a way that does not meet Department of Fish and Wildlife standards. We would have encouraged native planting among the rock to offset impact and wonder if incorporating plantings would have made this area functionally connected, therefore changing the way impacts should be evaluated on site. I wish we had more clarity about the origins of the riprap to alleviate this uncertainty. Thanks for considering these comments. Amaya Smith, Assistant Regional Habitats Program Manager, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, Region 5.
I'm confused, I think, a little bit over her comment on the riprap, an existing condition.
Right.
It was obvious that this mill was in place, gosh, back into the 50s, so far as I know. And that riprap has probably been there since the 50s. There were probably no regulations. So the fact that it's there now doesn't make it illegal. I think you could put it in again. But you know, the fact that it is there now, it is an existing condition.
Comments that I have related to those, and I think it's probably appropriate for applicants to provide some also. So Amaya's first point about the in lieu fee for existing projects. One of the options that I've been discussing for an in lieu fee would be to tap into an existing mitigation bank. These are programs that are set up that restore wetland areas, and people can reimburse those banks for impacts that they have elsewhere. We don't have any that specifically cover Skamania County or our area of Skamania County. There is the Columbia River Mitigation Bank, and there apparently is a process to justify inclusion in a bank, even though it doesn't specifically cover your area. Reason why I talk about that isn't to get into the specifics of a mitigation bank, but it's to state that those programs are specifically set up to pay for older projects. They're not paying for new projects, which is one of the suggestions that she makes, that This shouldn't go to cover cost overruns of older projects, but it should go to a new project. So want you to be able to consider the mechanisms of that as you consider that comment. The second one regarding the unpermitted riprap and the determination of functionally isolated. When they developed their existing conditions report and critical areas report the first time around, the city hired a third party to go in and review those suggestions to see if they held water or if some additional analysis should be done. Olson Environmental was the consultant that we used to review that. That report is included within the record tonight, and it led to the decision you made in 2020, and those assumptions have been included here. So related to other functional aspects of the vegetation that's on site, I think that it's appropriate for the applicant to address that.
I guess you'd need a definition of what constitutes certified riprap. I mean, I would think 70 years would be enough, but is there a definition lying around that says it's okay for this to hang out here?
There's a point in time where it'd be an existing condition. Don't know that there's anything in the record that establishes when the riprap was placed to know that it.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's been a while.
Again, the applicants have done some study and analysis on the timeline and history of the sites, and then when it was operational, and then investments in its shoreline ability would have been justified.
Well, even then, the place closed in 73, so that's 50 years.
Right.
So the shoreline is, the shoreline is deteriorating. That's why Tony Esty put those logs on around by the exhibit hall where the water was eating away at the shoreline and coming toward the sidewalk. So is there something that the applicant will do in the future to prevent their shoreline from going away because of the erosion and other things? And what can you do if it's a natural thing? I'm just asking. Thank you.
There are options to riprap out there that, we're seeing a lot more of that stuff being used in Puget Sound and one of the nearshore areas up there. So in fact, encouraging that when folks need to replace it or replace a retaining wall.
Yeah, they'll have to deal with that.
Yeah.
They had to.
Yeah.
Make changes.
So I assume if there's an issue coming up, if they had to replace something, if you had a failure and an erosion issue, it would go through a separate permitting process, Mary, and I suspect you're not going to see riprap there. So
I think I'd like to start narrowing down so that we have a decision-making process. So I think for you all, there are two courses of action tonight. One could be to continue as we have done the last couple of months, hold the record open, continue the public hearing to a future date to address some of the issues that you might or might not have with the project. A second option would be to get a decision on the books tonight, subject to adoption of findings at a future meeting. Findings and conditions potentially at a future meeting. I don't have a good sense from you or from the discussion where you're leaning with public access considerations. What I really would have liked to have brought you all was the analysis that they did to say that these types of public access are infeasible. And so here's a proposal for opinion. I don't want to put the responsibility on you to determine what a payment in lieu looks like across the table tonight with them. I would like to see them provide some indication of what they believe is an appropriate contribution toward addressing
Payment in lieu of
What specifically, Ben?
the public access that's not being provided, or that is the solution for public access that may be diminished,
should,
if you believe
Okay.
that that's the case.
so we're saying that based on what was previously approved and what is there today, there is some diminishment of public access. in terms of
And you all would
quantity
need to
and
say that.
quality.
You all would need to say that. And if you,
And if we did say that, then that's where the cost adjustment potentially,
Yeah, so I guess I wasn't here then, August, but that project wasn't built. So there wasn't, access wasn't provided. So I'm having a hard time with, holding this proposal to a standard of unreality. I mean, the reality is it's a 50-year vacant site with no public access to speak of today, right? We're proposing to meet our public access requirements in certain ways. We may not be fully satisfied with how they're going to do that or which easements need to remain. But I guess I'm having a hard time with the concept that there's something to be mitigated when they're actually creating a betterment of the current condition.
yeah, are we open or closed? Did we close the public?
We have not.
part of
sorry.
it, and so maybe recess it, and which provides you the opportunity to keep the record open.
I think that your first option would require, is there any outstanding public opinion still out there?
If new information is to be provided by the applicant, then there's the opportunity for new public opinion to be formed.
If in lieu of that, then I'm offering your second opinion.
I haven't closed the public hearing yet. Mary, if you want to make one last comment before I do.
As to what Charlie said, nobody knew that there was a public easement around the area. So to say that, now we discovered it 70 years later or 50 years later, it's a public easement, it's in the record, and, to me, that's it. Now we can use it. Before, nobody knew it was there, so nobody knew they could do anything other than the fishermen used to go out there and go down to the water there, but nobody walked that area because it's not accessible. The county just dumped a lot of crap, excuse my French, there, and sawdust and other things. So that has nothing to do with anything for this project. The easement is there, it's a public easement, and it should remain a public easement as much as possible. And I hope you all, you're losing a lot of public easement there. You're losing that little, let's say, north part where all those buildings are. You've lost that public easement along the water. I just don't understand why we need to give up stuff. The proponent knew what he was buying. He, I'm assuming, did his due diligence, and now because the plans are changing, it's how long do you change plans? So I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And I will close the public hearing.
To address your query or statement. So, we got to look at, it's a step process. So originally, if we look at page 345, this was basically the 3 lots that the applicant purchased from the county with the existing easement, which is denoted in the orange. So as you can see, it basically ran the perimeter of the property, guaranteeing that between the public access and the water, there was no infringement or sightline degradation.
So there was no buildings in front of your pathway. When they came in 2020, on page 350 or 347, the initial proposal was a greatly reduced pathway. And so between an agreement with the applicant and what the planning board was willing to negotiate, created the adjusted easement, which we currently have, which also was based on the site plan that the applicant provided at the time. So what you're seeing as a proposed is not only a deviation from what is the current, but also a completely different site plan, which we haven't even discussed. And so it kind of begs the question on, if you asked for this and you agreed to it, for whatever reason, now you're coming back and saying, we've changed our minds, we want to do something different, and we want to further reduce the public access.
Well,
Does that make more
so
sense?
who granted the original easements?
The original, when the county owned it,
The
The
county.
county did, okay.
Yeah.
And then
then they purchased
They
it with
purchased
the
it
easements in
with
place.
those easements in place.
Correct.
Right, and filed a development proposal in 2020 or whatever it
And
was.
requested this,
And said, we
initial
want to
change.
modify the easements to this, to the
Correct.
left-hand side.
right,
And now they're here with a new proposal and they want to modify the easements to what we see on the right-hand side.
correct.
So there've been easements in various locations proposed, either put in place by the county or proposed to be moved around by the applicant.
There's existing easements that were in existence when they bought the property.
Right, that's what I'm
And
saying.
now there's currently existing easements that were made with the agreement of the applicant.
Well, did we actually, those easements were proposed, they weren't approved, right?
No, those
They
were
were
approved. Those are the current easements. So what you're looking at
On the
on
left
the
side.
existing easements is what they asked for and what
was
and what
approved.
we granted.
I got it. Okay, that helps.
What you see now for the proposal
Right,
is different from that.
okay.
And like I say, it does considerably deviate from the original intent of the public access, that you had a perimeter path. And when they asked for this adjustment, that's when they agreed to do an improved path. Some parts of it were paved in the actual plan that they proposed.
The older one. That's
Well, not the proposed plan, but the actual site plan that was approved.
Right.
Has some of those as what they call a Florida path, which is a more unformalized path, more natural path. And then actual hard paved path so that you had access for people that were in wheelchairs or something like that.
And what's being proposed now is what we see in blue is paved.
Yes.
Right. And so it eliminates that natural public access
Right.
that would have been on the perimeter.
Right.
Like Mary spoke to, and like was the original easement that was provided when they purchased the property.
Thank you. I understand that history and that process. It doesn't change my opinion. I mean, doesn't change my opinion of what we should do now.
Right.
Because again, Mary was talking earlier about maintenance. Well, somebody's proposing to pave these walkways and maintain them.
They have an obligation because they have a site plan.
Sure, if they were to develop.
To do that.
If they
So
were,
you're not because they haven't built this,
yes,
doesn't mean that they already aren't obligated to provide
got it.
what is there.
Right.
And so
Right.
you have to maintain some accountability to what the agreement already was.
Yeah.
And that was the agreement the applicant had with the planning department when we made the changes to the original easement. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I understand that, but
Yeah.
again, I'm talking about bird in hand question here, right? Is if they're able to execute this plan and build the project and thereby build the walkways, the public is going to actually have paved walkways, which we do not have today. We have a fixed, we have a proposal that may or may not ever be implemented.
No, we haven't. It's not a proposal.
Well, it's not built yet.
No, that's what their site plan says, and it's
There's
approved.
just because we've approved a site plan doesn't mean they're gonna.
That is right. But when you have a site plan that says we're gonna put this here and this there,
You have to abide by that.
you have to abide by it.
When
If you're
you
gonna
develop.
change it,
Yeah.
you now have to go back
Right.
and ask for a change, which is what
Essentially.
the
what we're doing.
proposed
Yeah,
is.
essentially what
And
we're
what I'm saying is their proposal is a deviation from the original intent from pre-1920 or 2020.
Right.
And what the mutual agreement was in 2000 and, that the applicant had when they wanted that change. So whether they acted on it or not, that was the agreement.
Right, but the whole development scheme has changed too. From
Sure.
What was previously there, where we had condos, basically, or those multi-dwelling units,
Right.
and those are now gone.
Yeah,
And
it's
now
different.
they're on
different
these
program.
individuals. So
Right.
it's really a different proposal.
Right.
And I don't recall in our last conversation as to whether or not we had that conversation on the conservation areas either. In terms of,
The 2020 proposal, these two spots, the southern connection back and connection to the property to the south, and then the northern one were not required to be constructed at that time, but the easement was preserved so that future construction can be
The
carried
the
out.
wider lines in
The
that
wider
earlier
lines.
proposal were easements, not paved trails.
Just those two, the Florida.
Right, on page 347. If you look at that, that shows what they call the
Right,
Florida path.
Right.
And so that's in that same,
Whatever that is. I don't know. what it
It looks like Florida.
is. I hope not.
They named it that because of me.
I'd like, what is that little phallic thing that pokes out of the first one, but it's missing from the rest of them?
It's just the
The one down here,
topo lines.
The one in the center of the,
Peninsula,
That's a peninsula.
is it
a viewing area.
not in the,
It's called a viewing area. 2020.
did it just,
I think they just kind of left it off because it's not really buildable.
oh, okay. It's not in the existing or the aerial photo taken between 52 and 73. I was just curious as to how it got there, but it's neither here nor there.
Well. So I guess I don't know if we're ready to start trying to take an action, but I am.
okay, I am.
I mean, I'm not sure if anyone agrees with me, but I don't have the benefit of having been here before. I mean, I'm a new member of the board. But I see a significant net public benefit to the amount of pedestrian access that's being provided in the proposed plan. Is it exactly what it was before? No. Are there areas where I wish it were more generous to the public? Yes. But on balance, I think they've met the requirements or met both the intent and the substance of the code. So I think I would like to move that we approve the permit subject to findings and conditions. Now we have some debating and maybe continuing to do with respect to the findings and conditions, but to my eye, I mean, this project merits approval. All requirements considered. And to my eye, the amount of public access being provided by the site plan as proposed is sufficient to meet the requirement. Again, is it everything we could hope for? Is it everything that someone might have agreed to in the past? Maybe not, but I think it's sufficient to meet the code. So that's my motion.
I'm with Charlie on that one. This is just because I worked at the lodge and I used to deliver mail to the old folks. They would eat the path up. So
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, didn't you, the old folks what?
the assisted living
Yeah.
place.
What about? I didn't hear.
They love the path. They would love this.
They would love the path if
Yeah.
if it were there.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's a motion.
that's a motion.
Is that a second?
That is a second.
Any further discussion?
I object. Because I think we're still in conversation. Your point is that the proposal provides a benefit or an excess or an addition to public access that we currently have.
Correct.
There's nothing there.
That's right.
However, the easements are there.
In theory. There's-
No,
Well, I mean, I
not in
understand
theory,
Sure,
they're legal
sure.
easements.
I understand what an easement
Okay.
is, but until I can walk on it, it's not much
You
good.
can
to
walk
me.
on it right now.
Sure, but yeah, it's pretty not a good trip.
It's still there. And so what the current existing conditions
Yeah.
show the easements and proposed paths.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
And that's what the applicant said that they would do.
That's what they said they would do then.
That's
When
still
it was
current.
approved.
There is no time frame that says, oh, well, you didn't act on this in 2 years, it all goes away. We're not starting from scratch and saying, oh, wow, look, they're gonna put a parking space in with a little trail around it. That's better than what's there now. That doesn't make logical sense. A paved circle does not represent what is currently required and that they agreed to. This is the access that they currently are given.
Right.
And that's unobstructed for public looking out into the water. This, you're asking the public to walk behind the buildings, losing that access
Part of the trip behind the buildings.
on
yes.
both the north and the south side. Access, no access. Sure, they can walk, but you're looking at a building.
Yes, I understand. I
Okay.
understand what you're saying, August,
All right.
but that was also attached to a development a project that include condominiums.
An approved site plan
Yes, and no
on the
one,
books.
no one is going to build a condominium in Stevenson in the rest of my life. So I'm being a little hyperbolic, but the point is that that project did not turn out to be feasible in the market, so it didn't happen.
This is a chicken and egg.
I understand that,
Okay.
but then
So what they're doing is they're asking first, let's change where the public access is. And we want to build something different.
both, yes, they're asking
Yes,
for both.
the two things are not related because they want to build something different and their access or their ability to do that is hinged by the public access, redrawing it because, oh, we don't really like what we agreed to before is not
Well,
a valid argument.
I haven't seen the site plan, and we're getting off on a tangent here. I beg forgiveness for that. I haven't seen the site plan for the condos, but I'm sure they had a smaller footprint and a taller, and they were taller buildings. So this is a lower intensity development scheme of cabins instead of multi-story condos. And so of course, it's going to be configured differently on the site.
So public access is a granted access.
I'm aware of that.
It's on the books.
Yes.
That we have the right now to go and access that portion. What you're saying is because it's not paved, it's not pretty. Now we're gonna eliminate that and allow them to who says that they're gonna actually follow through with whatever
They
the
might
new
not,
development?
they might not build
They
this
might
way.
not, but now you've eliminated that access because it's just one more step.
I hear you.
Okay.
I am less focused on the precise configuration of the access than I am on its availability in the real world. And its availability in the real world will be if this development scheme, unlike their previous one, pencils and they build it and they pave the paths, I'll go walk on them. I'm not going to walk that site today, no matter what easements are on it. So that's my perspective on this, that we always, when we're doing development approvals, have to try to make sure we are accomplishing the public's purposes, like access to the water, which is the whole shoreline concept. But we also have to approve projects that can be built. And this one might be, the last one wasn't.
Right.
That's where I'm coming from.
And I hear what you're saying, but again, I go back to what was the original intent
I understand that.
and the public access that was required of them when they purchased the property was unobstructed access for the public on the perimeter of that property,
Yes.
which the current rendition maintains.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're making a jump to a different site plan, which we really haven't even gotten into discussing, and a request for an elimination of the same type of public access. That's what the conversation is.
Diminution.
We have discussed the site plan. We did
I,
that at the last meeting.
I think it's mindful that we keep in mind that, you know, the priorities. And I would think that the cabins are the priority. You know, if we stick a pathway in front of their cabin, you know.
Well, some of it is. I mean, some of it's.
Yeah.
I- We go back to the underlying zoning and the ordinances we have here. And it's a balancing act is what we're trying to do, to balance a variety of objectives. We have that obligation to look at the underlying causes. This is an area where this sort of commercial tourist activity is a use outright. It contributes to the local economy. It's also an area where we have some environmental interests. And so we're looking at what do we have here in terms of those fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. It's where we have an interest in providing public access to the water. How do you bring all those elements together? Because right now that property is not doing anything for either for any of those aspects. There isn't any public access. You've got an area out there that's filled full of invasives. And in terms of those areas that really are next to the water and could provide habitat are seriously lacking. And there's no commercial or economic benefit to the city. So how can we find a workable balance here? I mean, clearly, yes, August, we did approve that earlier site plan. And they come back and they said that doesn't work. That's not going to work. We can't do that. So now they come up with with an alternative proposal.
Which their alternative proposal takes away from access that is currently granted. It's a reduction of what we currently have. So in a different scenario, if I was to buy a piece of property and that property had some restrictions on it, and say it had a creek, obviously I can't build on the creek, so I have to formulate my site plans to fit on the buildable lot, which is kind of the condition that they have. The existing plan, both the easement and the site plan, is a successful combination of those two things.
So what do you want the applicant to do? I mean, you want them to reconfigure the site plan?
That's what they want. They basically said, we want to recreate a new site plan, and to facilitate that, we need to change the public access.
Right.
The public access is the primary thing. That was there existing before they either bought it.
I'm saying, I'm just trying to understand what do you want to see happen here?
What I'm saying is that it should not be the public's responsibility to give away because the developer can't fit what they want to develop.
Well,
that's not an existing condition.
Right, but we, the public, have zoned this site for active recreation, and this type of use is an allowed use in that property. What do we want to see happen there? And my answer is, when I saw this proposal, something about like this. This is about what I would hope to see there in terms of a use of that property in conformance with our zoning. And what the exact conditions are in terms of where the pathways are, how many of them they are, how wide they are, what they connect to, all that's relevant. But again, I think being simplistic, but that's I find the same theory that this property used. What's the public benefit of that? How's that zoning being carried out today? Not at all.
But nothing to do with zoning.
Yes, it does. We zone properties because we want things to be built there and maintained once they are. And nothing has been built here in 50 years.
Zoning and public access don't have anything to do with it.
Yes,
No, we don't. Zoning did not create public access.
zoning is intended to produce development of some kind or another.
Right, and we're not prohibiting that by having access. They bought the property knowing that the perimeter of this property is unbuildable. We cannot obscure anything from it. What they're asking now is we want to be able to push the buildings to the outside and have the public access to the inside.
They actually have indeed done that in part of the property.
On part of the property, correct? And of course, making an effort to change, they maintain the perimeter completely all the way around.
And again, I understand, but this is the perfect enemy of the good argument you and I are having. And the trail is between the buildings and the water from the northwest corner of the property to the southwest corner of the property. And there's a portion where it goes behind 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cabins on the south side and 3 cabins on the north side. But the whole eastern face of the peninsula has a trail between the buildings and the water. And it's a paved trail. But it will be if it's built. And so that's why I say on a net benefit basis, I think this meets our code's requirements and the intent of the zoning. And we're not going to dispute about that.
So again, the zoning has no relation to the intent of what public access, because this whole thing was, this whole piece was county property. It was all county property. So that was access for everybody on the whole property. When the county decided to sell it privately, the public asked to maintain that easement on the perimeter of the thing. The public, the county did not voluntarily do that. Our obligation is to maintain what the public asked for, right? With the balance of,
I mean, my motion based on the code. No,
it's current. It's not about history. It's what is currently there. Currently there, they are required to provide unobstructed access on the complete
my
perimeter.
motion is to approve the permit with this site plan. That's perhaps subject to further conditions depending on what that site plan.
And his answer was,
She's not. She's on the call.
whatever she said.
For discussion?
I think I'm clear. Not a motion, approval subject to conditions that I may come up with.
Let me, yeah, so let's bear down on that, and maybe Jeff, I need to amend my motion. You've given us proposed conditions. I don't think I'd see a need to modify those unless we want to require them to reconfigure the footprint of the project and change the relationship between where the cabins are and where the trail is. We have obviously not been in this argument. My view is this site plan is sufficiently good in terms of the relationship of the buildings and the trail and the waterfront that it deserves approval. But someone could say, and not going to be me, oh no, you gotta move those 3 cabins or those 4 cabins, put the trail back out there. I'm not prepared to go there. But I mean, there may not be the majority of us that wants to approve the conditions that we recommended. But my motion is to approve the permit with the conditions